Hey, man. You can hear me? Can you see me? Cool. I'm going to close some windows. I feel like I'm going to close Chrome. If I close Chrome, is that going to close Zoom as well? Cool. I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you? Cool.
Yeah, we are streaming now without our faces. So there is a voice online, but there is no our faces. So we'll give people a few minutes to join us. I'm checking if we're visible everywhere. So
You want me to put my AirPods in, or because of feedback, or it's all right?
It's perfect.
Okay, cool.
You don't have to do anything.
Beautiful.
Perfect. So yeah, we are on YouTube. We are on Facebook.
I can't hear you.
I'll mute here. Yeah. Okay. We still have like 4 minutes. So you can mute yourself. I will mute myself, and we'll get back in like 10:02, 10:03, so people can join.
Sorry. In
Like
2 to 3 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah. You can just mute yourself now, and
cool.
like come back in 5 minutes.
Cool.
People still see a welcome screen, so they can join.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Hey, do I have 1 minute?
1 minute, perfect. Okay, I'm switching on to live so people can see us.
Oh,
Okay, good. Perfect. You can unmute yourself, right, Reid?
yep.
There we go. I can see voice here. Let me check online. Yeah, there are a few guys working already. Yeah, we are online, man. Okie dokie. So I'm in Dallas, guys. Reid is in New York City. He's in Brooklyn. So that's what we're doing today. It's amazing how we can connect together in the COVID-19 times. But this is not about COVID. It's about artificial intelligence and ethics. So we would like you to push. I would love to push you guys to that moment when you start thinking if your smartphone or your car is making an ethical decision. I'm not talking here about killing people. I'm talking here like if that smartphone is directing you to the gas station, for instance, of Shell brand, is that ethical? Maybe these guys are doing something in the background and trying to get more sales to Shell instead of Valero and other players. So we are talking today about ethics and artificial intelligence. So we have a Reid. Reid is an amazing guy. He runs his own consultancy business and he was going to introduce us to us. But he's also advising Ernst Young, which is called nowadays EY, in artificial intelligence. He's a part of the senior board of directors team. Sounds like a sounding team, but he will tell us more about it. Before I give the voice to Reid, please remember, I have my chat here. I can see there's already a few guys right there. I see your questions. You can ask questions directly here and I will pass them to Reid so he can answer them online today. For those guys that register or Eventbrite, we will be sending an email with a wrap up when you will find a Reid LinkedIn profile, his company profile, so you can go directly to him afterwards and you guys can start conversation if you are in any need. Okay, Reid, so why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and we start talking about the topics we prepared for everybody.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So first, thanks for having me. Welcome everyone who's ever there. My name is Reid Blackman. I'm the founder and CEO of Virtue, an ethical risk consultancy, and we focus on helping companies operationalize digital ethical risk management, which is particularly important in a time when everyone is trying desperately to transform digitally because everything is going digital because of the pandemic in particular. So I work with clients on those things. I also, as Art mentioned, I'm a senior advisor to Ernst Young and I serve on their AI advisory board. Prior to doing all of this, I was a philosophy professor for a decade, publishing, researching, teaching ethics that whole time.
Yeah. So he started guys, he started to work on that topics before even the artificial intelligence was on the table. Or maybe if it was on the table, there was somewhere else we were not even thinking about that. So he's a very experienced guy in ethics first, and then artificial intelligence came. And when I was trying to convince people to join us today, and the competition in huge cyberspace, everything is running live webinar, I started with the chip under the skin. But I will put that topic on the side a little bit, and I will ask you, Reid, a general question, because from my perspective, I think not many people understand artificial intelligence. I mean, people understand that this is something that can do something on behalf of us. So for instance, when the Tesla is on the autopilot mode, some kind of magical algorithms are going around. So that people understand. But tell us, like, where are we now in this subject of ethics and artificial intelligence? What's going on right there? And why is a big deal? Because certainly it's not on the first page on the newspaper. Ethical, artificial intelligence, it might be sometimes when the startup or somebody pour a lot of money in artificial intelligence, but otherwise it's somehow running in the background. So can you give us a perspective, ethics, AI, where we are now, what we need to know to catch up?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple. First of all, it actually is in the paper quite a bit.
Okay.
They might not say it's AI, but they'll say things like Apple, Goldman Sachs's algorithm for the Apple credit card discriminates against women, and that's an AI issue.
Really?
That's the topic. You had United Healthcare's Optum is being investigated by regulators because they allegedly have a biased algorithm that directed or recommended to doctors and nurses to pay more attention to white patients than to sick or black patients. That's an AI product. So you actually are seeing this stuff in the headlines. You might not see it under the description of artificial intelligence, but it's still going on. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, in response to your question about like what is artificial intelligence. So let's distinguish between two kinds. There's artificial general intelligence. And there's artificial narrow intelligence. General intelligence is all the Terminator stuff. Right?
Terminator, like the Ernie guy, like all these robots like invading Earth.
Exactly, right. The robots, they're super intelligent. They can do everything humans can do and more. Right? That's artificial general intelligence. That's the kind of thing that Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking is and were worried about, respectively. Don't worry about it. At least not for now. It's a ways off if it's going to be existent at all. That's under hotly disputed. The vast majority, or the only kind of AI that we have right now, is artificial narrow intelligence. And even within artificial narrow intelligence, the vast majority of it, as you know, Arik, is machine learning. Now, that might sound sort of technical, but it turns out that the way that machine learning works lends itself to ethical screw-ups. And I mean the kinds of ethical screw-ups that genuinely harm people, genuinely infringe upon privacy, invite lawsuit, invite regulators, invite reputational risk. So, these are serious things. Here's my sort of very quick crash course of machine learning. It's just learning by example. So my favorite sort of stupid example is, hey, look, you got a new dog. You want to train, you want to upload a picture of your dog to your computer, and you want it to sort of recognize that it's your dog or recognize that it's a dog at all. So how do you do that? You can't tell a computer and be successful if it has 2 eyes and 2 ears and a nose and blah blah blah, then it's a dog. But you can't do that. There's too many things going on. Like first of all, not all dogs have 2 eyes. And lots of animals have 2 eyes that aren't dogs, like most humans, right? So trying to write that out is just bloody impossible. And so what you do is you just give it a bunch of examples. So you say, okay, hey, computer, hey, software, hey, AI, here's 1,000 pictures of dogs. Go look through those and figure out what the pattern is that unites all these things as making them sort of fall under a single category. When I upload you the 1,001st picture, if it matches if it has the same kind of pattern that those other first 1,000 pictures did, then label it dog. If it doesn't have that pattern, label it not dog. And if like your machine learning, your AI did a good job pattern recognizing, then it's probably going to get it right. If it didn't, then it'll get it wrong. And then it takes that 1001st one and uses it as another example to learn from, to slightly adjust what pattern it's recognizing among pictures 1 to 1001.
So you are saying like that artificial neural intelligence,
narrow, general or narrow. Yeah.
Okay, intelligence. It's most of that is machine learning, which is not about like machines and algorithms that much, like learning by the example. So I will give you another example. Like if you go on Facebook, they try to find like deep fakes or the videos that are like produced by computers, and they are putting words in somebody's mouths. But that means that if they want to do that, they have to upload like thousands of other videos or even screenshots, whatever we call it, to learn that algorithm pick up deep fakes. That's correct?
Yeah. So look, there's two issues here. There's one issue which is like, what are the ethical risks that come along just with the nature of what machine learning is?
Okay.
So for instance, it requires a shit ton of data.
Right.
Now,
that's correct.
That's going to be my data, your data, everyone who's listening data, everyone's data, which means that the fuel for machine learning encourages, or acquisition of that fuel encourages, violations of privacy, because companies are incentivized to do whatever the hell they can to get that data so they can train their AI, so they can have that product that delivers them bottom line ROI. So the nature of machine learning is such that the fuel, acquiring the fuel, the data, encourages violations of privacy.
That's a good thing, a fuel, because without that you can't do anything, because you will be making a lot of mistakes, right? Like the dog example or cat example you showed.
Your machine learning won't get, no machine learning gets off the ground without data, not just some data, but a ton of data, right? So there are other kinds of things, like the outputs that it gives are often, or maybe always, unexplainable. Like we don't know why. So in the dog example, the AI, the machine learning, is not looking at ears and noses, it's looking at pixels, and it's finding patterns among pixel levels, which means the pattern that it finds is utterly incomprehensible to humans. We can't process stuff at the pixel level like that. So now if you take that and you use it for determining whether or not someone should get insurance, whether they should get a mortgage, what their credit score should be, whether they should get an interview after they submitted their resume, and so on, then you're coming up with decisions or recommendations whose rationale you can't explain, which seems worrisome.
Right.
So look, there's sort of two kinds of things. One is there's the nature of machine learning encourages violations of privacy. And then the other risks come from the particular way that you apply that engine. So at the end of the day, your AI is going to be an engine for a product.
Right.
And all kinds of products are possible, like deep fakes. And so you have to think not only about the ethical risks that come along with any AI project or any ML project, you have to think about the ethical risks that come along with the particular kind of product that you're developing and deploying.
So, but here is the question. One thing is like you collect that data, and there's a lot of companies. I've been reading about the startup. By the way, it might be in New York, that they kind of use drones so they can scan the people's properties, and then they can help insurance companies to come up with insurance product, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But also that's one of part of the ethics. But also like the outcome. But the question is, can AI cheat on you? Like, can it give you a dog, but can it say it's a dog, but in fact it's not a dog, but it will give you an outcome that you will make the specific decision about like basing on that outcome. But can it cheat on you? Can it give you a results that, like I said with gas stations, somebody sends you to Shell because that's the best deal for you, but that might be a better deal, but you are not able to verify that because they use so much data to direct you to that gas station that you are not able to even check.
Yeah. So there's two questions there. One is, can it screw up? And the second is, can it do its job well, but in a way that is unethical?
Right.
right? So
Exactly.
the first one is, of course, it's a piece of technology. It's not perfect. So there are going to surely be false positives and false negatives,
Right.
right? Like this is a dog when in fact it's not a dog, or this is not a dog and it is a dog, or this person deserves a mortgage when in fact they don't, or this
That's
person
even
does not
harder
deserve a
because
mortgage
when it
when
comes
in fact they do.
to photos or videos, you can kind of like at the end kind of like compare it visually. But when it comes to decision like, hey, there's a best insurance for you, and then they cannot explain how that was came up with that because that was kind of like prepared by the algorithm. So then you need to like either jump into that deal or you start asking questions, but probably they will not be able to answer all of them.
So it's helpful to tease apart two issues. One is explainability, the other is transparency. So the way that you think about explainability is whether the outputs of the AI are actually explainable. Like, do we know how the hell it came to the decision that it did? Used to be that, if you're trying to determine someone's credit score, like the algorithm could be very simple, right? And, you take their total income, you subtract their expenses, you multiply by their lifetime, blah, 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 whatever, right? Maybe you take, some certain kinds of historical facts about them into account, and you sort of say like, hey, here's why you got the credit score that you did, or here's why you got approved or why you didn't get approved. But now it can't do it. The transparency issue is about how transparent you are or how clearly you communicate to end users about what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? So like, hey, so we're making recommendations about what gas stations that you should go to, and you should know that we are sponsored by Shell, and so we are, the first thing on our list will always be a Shell station because of our sponsorship. Right? Yeah. That would be a kind of transparency.
You're right. So that takes us to another question. Like, let's say we have the machine. I'm not saying about the robot because you said that kind of like a future. But let's say we have this is the your vacuum hoover that can be a robot from iRobot company, for instance, and it has a specific algorithm that can learn how your house is inside, what kind of floor you have, so it can adjust the brushes and everything like that. It's a pretty smart. It's a running computer that just clean your house, and the question is, can because that machine can start doing other stuff. It can bring you a beer. Right? If somebody put it somewhere on that, it can go somewhere, and somebody can put a beer. It can be like a running table, whatever. But
sure.
Will that robot, and I'm talking about the robots we already experience, like cars, like this kind of things, like other toys we use, will they have responsibilities for that decision? I know there's a vast discussion about that the creator of the algorithm should be responsible, but how you see that? Like, who is going to be responsible for my car just taking a hard left so my kid at the back is kind of harmed? Who? Because otherwise, that's my fault. When I drop the beer, that's my fault. But what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, so look. First of all, when it comes to there's two kinds of when you talk about fault, you have to talk on the one hand. There's legal fault, and then there is, if you like, ethical or moral fault. Okay. The legal fault I don't know about. I'm not a lawyer, but it's also the case that a lot of the law is just not settled because the law hasn't caught up to the technology and likely never will.
Okay.
Look, when it comes to people developing robots or any kind of AI machine or emerging tech machine, they are taking on a certain kind of responsibility. Because you're taking on some task, and you take on certain tasks, you have to do it at least minimally decently well.
Yes.
Right? Like that's maybe you didn't, to take a sort of kind of analogous case, you didn't have to volunteer at the soup kitchen, but now that you have volunteered, you can't just go there and just start pouring soup on the floor. Right? Of course. You have an obligation now to, like, as long as you're going to be there, to behave yourself appropriately, to pour soup properly or give food out, etc. Similarly, you don't have to design robots, to sell to consumers. But once you do, you take on a certain kind of responsibility to do it minimally decently well. So when I think about accountability and responsibility, I don't expect a kind of perfection. And I don't think anyone expects a kind of perfection from the developers. But what they do expect is that they're not negligent or they're not reckless. So the question is, have they, in developing the robot or whatever it is, the product, have they gone through some kind of due diligence process where they look at the ways that things can get ethically screwed up? Right? If they're like, oh, to hell with it, like,
we don't care.
Yeah, maybe this is gonna like pick up some glass in one place of the house and move it to some other place, like the kid's bedroom, and some kid will cut his feet, but that's not our problem, right? You wouldn't think that that was okay. You'd think that no, you got to think seriously about how this thing works in such a way that it minimizes certain kinds of risks.
Sure.
Right?
So you are saying like this is kind of like a general rule that if somebody's putting a product on the market or a service, and if it's like a old classical algorithm driven or the new modern top-notch AI driven, excuse me, at the end is a product. And if that company is serious, like Google, Apple, Airbnb, they want that product to shine. They don't want to make the obvious mistakes, because otherwise, of course, we will just drop that brand and move to another brand, right? So that's one thing. The reason I ask this question is like many people, when they hear about artificial intelligence, and I personally think that they don't understand how that works. Maybe they shouldn't even do that, but they are kind of afraid that there is a black box. Nobody knows how that works. So because nobody knows how that engine works, we are not sure where this engine will drag us to, right? So suddenly it might take a hard right and drag us to, I don't know, to Bush, while we wanted to go to New York. And that's what I think. That's why I ask you this question. But okay, go ahead.
So there's two things. First of all, with regards to due diligence, I mean, take an example that literally came out yesterday with, and you mentioned Google. So Google's subsidiary Sidewalk Labs was going to build a smart city in Toronto, over something like 180 acres. And they just scrapped it. They spent $50 million developing the whole thing, developing the idea, and they scrapped it as of a couple of days ago. Now they say it's because of the pandemic, but it was also beset by a PR problem, which has its source with ethical problems, because lots of people, citizens of Toronto, activists, people in tech, were fired up about the lack of transparency about what they're going to do with all the data they're collecting with the smart city.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that was $50 million because they didn't do their ethical due diligence. If they had sort of said, like, we need to really think carefully about the kind of data that we're generating and collecting and how we're supposed to share it and how we're communicating that to relevant stakeholders. They didn't do any of that, so they faced a backlash, which ultimately, at least partly, if not significantly, contributed to the pulling of the whole project. That's
so that's where you guys come to play. So anybody that is listening to us and is building an app or an ecosystem of apps or a software platform, whatever, that drives AI, which, as I understand from what you, Reid, said, can always make a mistake because it keeps learning all the time, and that you always need to prepare that ethical part of it, because it also influences your your public relations, right? Because you can, that's what you said. I understand this way, that if you have that ethical process or strategy underneath your project, and then you just go in the front and say, hey guys, we're building this, and the way we handle your data, or the way we practice that, or the way we teach our algorithms is like this or like that. Because honestly saying, I'm a big fan of Gmail, but every time they update something with AI and my spam filter is getting better and better, I'm happy. But how they do it? No way, man. I don't know what they read on in my mailbox to get that to get that spam filter smarter. So okay.
I mean, sometimes you don't care because it's so low stakes.
Yes, like, of course.
Filtering email, it's relative. I mean, you could lose a crucial email, I suppose, but it's not that high stakes in a way. It's not life and death. So the higher the stakes, the more it's important to do your ethical due diligence properly. And if you're talking about any technology is going to impact society in a big way, then do your due diligence.
Right.
And to the other point that you were talking about, we can't explain these things. They're black boxes. It might take a left. I want to go right. It might take you to New York. I don't want to go there.
I can't control it then.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is an issue of the question is, why is explainability important? So there's a bunch of people in the AI ethics space who are very concerned about the black box nature of AI, and that we need explainability. It's absolutely ethically essential that we have explainability. I'm convinced that we need that explainability is necessary in some cases and not in all cases. If it's going to make decisions about whether someone gets probation, hell yeah, we need an explanation. And that's because if we're going to tell someone you're not getting probation, you're going back to jail for another 2 years, but we don't exactly know why we're doing that, that's to violate something like fairness, trust, respect. Like, that's all screwed up.
Okay.
If you just want your thing though, just to get it right, and explainability isn't necessary for like fairness and justice and respect and stuff like that, then I don't think explainability is necessary. And the trust involved is distinct. So like, we want to trust our political institutions that they're operating in a just manner. We don't care about justice when the thing is trying to figure out whether to turn left or right. Like, we just want the damn thing to work well. And so there, it's not trusting. It's not trusting in the AI in the way that we want to have trust in our political governance. It's that we want to trust that it will take a left turn when it should take a left turn, and it won't take a left turn when it shouldn't take a left turn. Like, that's it. So, and if you've done your testing properly and you've got like a million cases of potential left-hand turns and it always gets it right, you might not know how it gets it right every time, but the fact that it gets right and has a phenomenal track record, that might be sufficient reason to trust that the thing will operate well.
I like that analogy. So putting in my words is like, you don't need to understand justice, institutions, the procedures and everything like that. It's always great to know the law, but I'm not talking about like studying the law. I'm saying that you don't need to understand like the justice departments or whatever, how they work to trust them. So, but that trust comes from acting. So how they act, what they do, how they solve issues, then you get trust. So if we have more and more AI-based product around and we start getting to understand that results is better because artificial intelligence is behind. So great example is YouTube. Like, when you look for the specific video, it used to be tags and text. Now they can read the video inside. They can give you a specific second when you should start watching, because that's the second when your dilemma is, that your challenge is, and you don't need to watch the whole thing. So, and after a couple examples or a couple challenges, you find it very useful, you will find that AI as a good thing. So, but you don't need to understand what they do to give you that result, right? So that's how.
That's a good example. Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, in the political case, we often do care about not just results; we care about process. Yeah. And in fact, we think that whether the situation is a just one depends upon how the process unfolded.
Correct.
Right. Yes. So, like, due process. Court conclusions or decisions of juries can be challenged on the grounds that the process wasn't a fair one, right? And similarly with AI, sometimes the process matters a great deal, especially if it's making decisions about who gets the mortgage, who gets insurance, who gets the job, etc. But there are other cases where the process doesn't matter.
Yeah. I get that.
Sorry, hold on 1 second.
Sure. Guys, we have questions waiting on the line. So in a minute, I'll start asking them. So, Reid, what you're saying is basically that we, but I mean, the other thing is that, so I guess the industry or people that evangelize about AI, they also need to put a lot of effort in explaining people that this is something that they can benefit from, and that it's like Airbnb at the beginning. Everybody, the geeks, early adopters, they understood that, but for many people it sounds kind of bizarre that you will be like staying in somebody's house or place or room, but after a while they keep doing a great job explaining people how that works, communicating safety procedures. Even now in the COVID-19 times, they implement a lot of different rules as well. So this is a lot of work for industry and people like you and your colleagues and friends and universities and academia to explain what is it, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. But the last question I have, and then I want to ask a few questions that people left here in the comments, is I know that you guys are working on a very great customers, and I pick up only one because that sounds exotic to me. Chips under the skin.
Yeah.
And I know that today I can keep my key card in my pocket, and when I'm in the kind of couple feet range, my car will open for me. I have a card that if I stick into the reader, I will open the door or open an elevator or pay in a terminal or whatever. Everything is kind of touchless. I mean, I need to be around. But I still have to take it out and remember to pick it up and have it in my pocket. Somebody can put it out under my skin, so I don't even bother. So tell us if it's possible, if it will come, or it's so many people don't understand that so well that will be eventually afraid of getting that, shoot in under your skin and sitting right there, and and just probably being visible through your skin.
Yeah, so one of my clients is a company called Biohacks, based in Sweden, and this is exactly what they do. They put chips in people's skin. They call it getting chipped.
Man.
So it sounds super screwed up, right? It's about the size of a grain of rice. It goes in the sort of fleshy part of your hand between your thumb and your forefinger, and you can't really see it unless you sort of feel for it or push or whatever. And you can put all sorts of information on there. So you can put your Metro card on there. You can put your car keys. You can access for doors, the front door to your house or maybe in your office. Cool. You can put your medical history information there. So let's say you're in a car accident, and rather than being a John Doe, you go to the ER and someone scans it and they know your name, they know your medical history, they know what drugs you're allergic to. But this whole thing sounds frankly, it sounds fucked up, right? It sounds, are you serious? Are you going to put a chip in people's hands? This is peak surveillance, right? Now, as with many technologies, it's not necessarily, it is sort of how it's built, but also crucially, it's how it's deployed. So I worked with them to figure out, how do we make this thing trustworthy? For two reasons. Number one, to earn the trust of clients or potential clients, to turn them into clients. And number two, earn the trust of government so they don't come in and regulate the company out of existence, right? So the owner of this company, Johan, recognized, one, he sort of cares about the ethics for its own sake. In fact, he's doing this in part because he cares about privacy, not because he wants it violated. It's a way of, in his mind, trying to secure the privacy of individuals. And because he wants to, since he's the first actor in this space, he wants to make sure to do it responsibly, because he believes other people will try to come in and be irresponsible and thereby put him out of business because the government will put him out. So the question is, how do you do it responsibly, right? So here's a couple things. Number one, there's no GPS in the chip. There's no GPS. It's all NFC, near field communication.
Okay.
So there's not a way of tracking someone's location and movements using GPS, because it just does not have GPS capability.
Okay.
The second thing is they explicitly refuse to work with any company that will require their employees to be chipped. They won't even work with companies that strongly encourage their employees to be chipped. They want to make sure that the choice to be chipped is autonomous, is made by the chip. And then one of my sort of favorite examples, or one of the things that I recommended that I took on, is, look, you're doing a kind of quasi-medical procedure, or you're injecting something into someone's skin. When you do a medical procedure, you need informed consent. And since what you're doing is really scary, not necessarily dangerous, but very scary, you need to have super duper informed consent. So how can we get super duper informed consent? And he had mentioned to me at another conversation that they have a kind of prototype version where they put the chip on the back of a sticker and put the sticker on your hand. And so I said, look, this is what you should do. You should, number one, before anyone does this, they have to sort of take a kind of tutorial and answer questions on a quiz. So they know exactly what they're getting into, and you know that they know because they've taken this quiz. Similarly, I have an electric scooter, and I had to, before the Bluetooth would allow my scooter to operate, I had to sort of take a tutorial on safety features and precautions.
Right.
But the other thing that they had to do was I said, you should have your clients or potential clients go through an onboarding process where they have to wear the chip on the sticker on their hand for 5 days to simulate the experience, so that when at the end of those 5 days, they have a really good sense of what it is that they're signing up for. So that when they say, yes, this is why I sort of call it super duper informed consent. They don't just sort of have like book knowledge about what's going on. They have a kind of experience that will reveal to them what it's like to have a chip in your hand.
Okay.
So you're getting as close as possible to the real thing so that when you get informed consent, it's really robust informed consent. And that's the kind of thing that builds trust from both potential clients and government bodies.
You mentioned
you're taking the welfare and the self-determination of your clients very seriously.
You mentioned before about this Google and Toronto part of the city project, which kind of like stopped, or where like somebody put the brake, the brake. But it sounds to me like here, that company, they need to do a lot of groundwork to communicate that to people, because what you say, I understand, but my mom, she needs to be kind of like, pitched the other way. I mean, more or less technological and more like, I don't know, what the benefits are, whatever it is. But to make that, to implement it on the scale, on the global scale, that's something that people will need to be very, very aware of how that works. It's not it's going to harm them. That kind of stuff, right? So there's a lot of public relationship and communication about transparency, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I put it is that I give the PR people something genuine and real to talk about, something substantive to talk about. So rather than just hiring some PR person saying, hey, tell them they can trust me, right? That's not really necessarily believable. On the other hand, tell them that these are the 5 concrete things we've done to protect the welfare, the privacy, and the autonomy of people. Tell them these are the concrete things that we do. That's something substantive. So here are all the benefits of what we do. You might be scared of this and that, but here are our policies that we strictly adhere to. Here's the kind of tutorial that we require of people. Here's the onboarding process. Actually, they call it an inboarding process.
Inboarding.
These are the things that we do. So then when your PR goes out to sort of say, hey, you can trust us, it's not, if you like, mere PR. It's not spin. It's genuine communication about your ethical credentials.
Okay. Oh man, thank you for this. Since we are like at the 40 minutes of our conversation, let me shoot a few questions I have here on chat. The first one is, that's the question. I'm going to read that. If we build a platform based on big data and machine learning, should we make an audit by some external team? How to be sure that what is built inside it's kind of ethical and stuff like that. So to me, it sounds like, let's say I'm building something. Of course, I can hire you. You can help me, but then should I also hire somebody else to make sure that my processes are proper, that everything is ethical? Maybe they will find some flaws about what I'm doing, and I should communicate the transparency better, whatever. It's like, what would be your recommendation for people they're working on that?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that that's in some way, what I do, which is I act as a kind of third party. I'm a kind of auditor. It depends on what stage they brought me in. Sometimes I get brought in during the sort of the concept phase. Sometimes a little bit later than that. Sometimes when things have been up and running, but V2 is going to come out soon, or V5 or whatever, and they want to make it better. So there's all that's, if you like, I play a kind of quasi auditing function now. There isn't, other than like me and maybe a handful of other people, there isn't anyone really doing that kind of work. So at the moment, so long as there's no regulations that require it, there's just a kind of, how do we build the ethical process within our organization so that when we develop and deploy products, or when we procure those products from third-party vendors, what's the ethical due diligence that we're going through? What does our how do we train our people to smell ethical smoke? If they smell smoke, what have we put in place? What's the alarm that they can pull? When they pull that alarm, who does it go to? The people that it goes to, what powers do they have? What's their jurisdiction? What are their decision criteria about what to do about that smoke and to determine whether or not there's really a fire? So this is really first and foremost building up internal capacities for ethical risk assessment. There may come a day when regulators decide there needs to be third-party reviews, and that might happen. We don't have it yet, but that's what happens in healthcare, for instance, right? You have IRBs and you have ethics committees, and I think we're likely to see that sort of thing with tech as well. Right now, it's on companies to do it themselves, and there are obviously ethical reasons for doing it, but there's also just straightforward bottom line ROI reasons having to do with reputational risk, legal risk, regulatory risk, etc.
Okay. Hey, here's another question. I'm not sure if that is for you, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. There is a question about the chip under the skin. What happens if it's going to be hacked or somebody, can get into that? It's still NFC. Can you give us any comment?
Yeah, I can't go into too many details here because I don't know, because cybersecurity is not my thing. But the short of it is that it's all on the blockchain. So that's one thing that's done to protect people.
Okay.
And it is NFC. So I know that they've done, they have cyber experts who've worked with them to repel hackers, but cyber hacking is not my expertise.
Okay. Thank you anyway for picking it up.
You can check out, I think it's Biohax, BIOHAX. I think it's .com.
Yeah. I put it here in the comments because I was on that page before preparing for the conversation with you. So the last question, I guess, because it's 10:45, we don't want to take more of your time, Reid. It's what are your thoughts on the politicians and key decision makers who are not familiar with AI being put in charge on making rules and regulations, or either interviewing, putting a pressure of Facebook and other companies? That's my part of the question. So I would like to join with that, with Anurag. He asked the question. So what's your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's messed up, right? So, you remember when Zuckerberg went before Congress, they didn't understand the very basics of how Facebook works.
Oh, Facebook, yeah.
That's Facebook.
I remember that famous saying, like, we run ads, Mr. Congressman, or whatever.
Yeah. Like, how do you make any money?
We run ads.
So if they don't understand that, they sure as hell don't understand machine learning. So it's a problem. I mean, we need a tremendous amount of education about these things, and our politicians, they're few and far between understand it. To the extent that they do understand it, they understand products, like specific products like deep fakes, right? So they can wrap their heads around deep fakes, but they can't wrap their heads around the underlying technology that fuels so many other kinds of products that politicians, regulators, government should be thinking very seriously about. So they understand products, and they also understand a little bit, sort of something like big data collection, things like that. Target marketing, they kind of understand that stuff. There were 5 senators who asked Google recently about what kind of data they were collecting and what they were doing with that data around COVID. So that's something that 5 senators cared about it enough and knew enough about it, but a lot of education needs to go on, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's really, frankly, it's not just our politicians, it's people in the C-suite, right? Like if you're a non-technical, non-engineer CEO, you might not just know very much about AI. You might just say that's like cyber stuff. Like, yes, I'll let my tech team take care.
That's why.
But the truth is,
that's why I'm sorry interrupting you. That's why I reached to you, because people. It looks to me that people, when they feel artificial intelligence, they somewhere close to robots and something from Mars. And
Yeah.
they don't that's my experience, like being in business. I work mostly with managers, business managers. So they
Yeah.
say, oh, artificial intelligence, that's the IT, which is
Yeah. Right.
like, and I always like to ask, do you watch YouTube? And they say, of course, I love YouTube. There's a lot of AI right there.
Yeah.
It helps you to find videos or part of videos, right?
Yeah.
So, and they said, really? It's like, I just watch YouTube. And then when you start talking about the apps, the Spotify engines, whatever it is, they understand how, because um, what I can see, they start to understand where is it, and then they start to think about, because they usually development managers, product development, they start to thinking about how they can start dragging some stuff to their products, like what does it mean to make a toothbrush smarter? What does it mean? Like
Yeah.
it's connected to iPhone or Android phone. What? But
Yeah.
what does it
Yeah.
mean to make it smarter, right? And I remember
Yeah.
there's a book I was reading about artificial intelligence, published by Harvard Business Review. There was an article by inside written by the AI chief of Facebook, and he said when he joined Facebook several years ago, he found it hard to drag business people to AI people and talk about business, because business consider them as like geeks. They are working so on the future. And then he went back to them and say, hey, what's your business problem? Tell us about few business problems, and we start to attack that
Yeah.
problems with that AI. And then when they found a solution and introduced that to business people, they start, that's where the trust began. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing you're talking about. But it seems like there's a lot of educational needs on the market, like educating people about AI. What is it? How to use that? Because eventually it's going to be around us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the truth is that I think some of those business people, they are a little bit, I think they're, frankly, I think they're intellectually intimidated by it. I think they think, oh shit, artificial intelligence, machine learning, like this is all engineering stuff. Like I went to B
Yes.
school. I don't do that. And like, I think they're afraid that they're not going to understand it, and no one wants to sort of take a class they know they're going to fail, right? But the truth is, the concepts are not that complicated, right? Like learning by example, not that complicated. Right? Um, you don't, you can understand plenty about AI and machine learning by understanding the concepts without having to learn how to code, right? Um, and so some of it is sort of fear reduction, so that they'll come to the table, so that you can educate them.
You're right, right. Okay, the last part is there's more questions coming, but let's leave them for later, maybe.
Yeah, they can reach out to me directly.
Yeah, of course. One thing, if you could give, like we're talking to founders here, business managers, basically business people. If you can give them, from your perspective, piece of advice regarding the ethics and AI, what that would be.
I mean, look, don't waste your time talking about AI ethics principles like a lot of companies do. This is not a theoretical issue. It's a hard-nosed practical issue. How do we not screw things up? How do we not wind up in the news media, in the social media, beat up on Glassdoor, whatever, right? So the question is, the thing that you have to walk away with this is that you need to operationalize ethical risk management. You need to figure out what are the concrete things that we can do on a systematic way that gets built into workflow to mitigate those risks. Now, there's a bunch of things that you need to do. In fact, if you want me to tell you the very first thing, or the most important thing, it's create an ethical risk due diligence process and figure out where in the joints of the organization you're going to put that. That's a very important first step that you can do with, not that much expenditure of resources, frankly.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. It answered that, and I know that you are trying to say people they should jump in the topic, start learning by the example, but also the spending time of evaluating what's the risk they are taking, what can happen when the scenario will go wrong, and kind of like predict that so they can act in advance, not wait for. By the way, I'm still thinking about this Google, what they did wrong in that Toronto that they have to start it out. But That's another whole topic. Hey guys, please remember, Reid. We will send you guys, all of you that register on the Eventbrite, we will send you a copy of this conversation. Will be a link to the YouTube video, but also Reid will wrap up a little bit about this conversation, put it on a one pager or maybe a slide, and we will send it to you with his contact data and his company data. So you can guys go directly to him, join him, connect with him on LinkedIn, and find him in the cyberspace so you can have a conversation. I'm sorry we could not answer ask the all questions, but I'm trying to be a time sensitive here because my guests are usual business people. They're busy, they have a lot of stuff to do, so I'm flattered they join here and spend the time with us. Reid, thanks a lot, buddy. I enjoyed that a lot. People, I think they like it too. I will be sending materials. You stay safe in New York, man.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.